called Mirror Mirror. And when I wrote the book, we decided to bring it out, and we brought it out at Dutch Ned's. And then we started doing other poetry there. I did a couple of things, a little, things I'd invite different poets that I had met to. And then Jomo Ward came up to me from the Central, and he says, will you do a poetry slam for the Central? And I said, sure. So Belv and I went down to the Central, and we ran the poetry slam at the Central for a year or longer. And I started publishing my books and other poets' books. They were their little fold-up, stapled book, chapbooks. So I published a bunch of those for different poets for free.
Now, you met a very interesting individual named Jimmy Angus Vieira at one of these slams or something.
James Angus Vieira.
He says only you can call him Jimmy.
He was. I used to call him Jimmy all the time. He told me he preferred Angus.
Yes.
But Angus is quite a guy. Angus is Angus. He Jomo Ward again knew Angus from the old days and the shipping and so on. And he's a sea rat pirate himself, Jomo is. And I think he's over in Fiji right now, riding on his boat. But anyway, he brought Angus in. And Angus said he had written a couple of poems. And I said, well, hell, get up here and do some of them. And he got up and he did one called The Snake Swallower of Cochin. And that was a very good poem. And then he just had something about him that I liked. And then he did another great one was The Farting Farmer. He did that. And he just did a lot of good things. And then he said he wanted to do a book. And so I published a book called The Snake Swallower of Cochin and Other Odd Occupations. And it went over really well. And while I was down there, I met guys like Thomas Hubbard, great poet, great guy. I met Clarice Keegan.
Where was this at? In Portland?
Down at the Central.
Oh, down at the Central.
Here in Seattle.
In Seattle, yeah.
Yeah, we were Seattleites.
Okay, because Angus is in Portland now, but this was
Yeah,
Seattle.
yeah, he's down in Portland now.
Because that's where the good strip clubs are.
Yeah, Angus is quite a character, but he's one of those people, if you're in trouble at 3 a.m. in the morning and you don't know who to call, and Angus, call Angus because he'll show up. And he'll get you out if he can. If there's any way, he'll figure it out. So.
Okay, so
I don't know what kind of version of Wally Lane to give you. I'm not going to mention the fact that he spent some time in school. Actually, I'll tell about him as much as I know from as long as I've known him. In the year 1994, I was hanging out at the Central Saloon when I was in Seattle. I owned an apartment house in Leshai, and Pioneer Square, the Central Saloon, was like my other living room. It's where I went to pick up girls, drink beer, listen to the blues. And the owner, an old friend of mine, another merchant seaman, and captain of sailing vessels, Ken Jomo Ward, sat down on the next stool one day and said, "Hey, a guy named Wally Lane is starting a poetry slam here. Once a week there'll be poets reading, and you two ought to get together," because he'd read some of my early poems. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. He offered me, said he'd pay my way in free for the first poetry slam, $5. Well, I met Wally, and we hit it off right away. And I started reading there, going to the slams, became a friend of his. A year later, I figured I had enough poetry to make a book, and I said, well, Wally, we're going to shit or get off the pot here. And he said, well, Jimmy, I think we ought to write it. My name's actually James Angus Vieira, but I shortened it to Angus when I started writing poetry. But that doesn't mean Wally can't call me Jimmy. Nobody else can, but he can.
Well, he used to be a boxer, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, he's a tough guy. He's a very tough guy. And this last weekend, here it is 19 years later. And I was just visiting his house yesterday, over the weekend. We were talking about ways to promote my mystery novels and life in general. He helped me load my car to come down here. And I said, Wally, all the countless hours, all the time you've spent on my literary career for very little monetary reward so far, I don't know how I could ever repay you. Or I just want to thank you for it. And he said, well, Jimmy, the reason I did it is because you're not an asshole. And that's just about the highest compliment I've ever received. If Wally Lane says you're not an asshole, you're not an asshole.